Paul's writing to Timothy to give instructions, and well, I'll just read verse 11. Women should learn in quietness and full submission. I do not permit a woman to teach or assume authority over man. I'll continue reading. She must be quiet, for Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not the one deceived. It was the woman who was deceived and became a sinner. So just to pause there, you're like, well, this verse is misused in a lot of ways. First of all, it's saying women can't teach or hold authority in our churches, but it also then uses the Adam and Eve basically to say, like, the woman's second in command.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm going to quickly just highlight here is in this entire letter, there is a unique focus on the women within the community. And you're like, man, why is there a unique focus on the women within the community? I mean, here's how we handle widows. Here's what a widow is defined within the community. And what it seems like is happening is, as you read it, if you were to read it with the lenses of the entire context of this letter, is that Paul's trying to warn them against a belief system that seems to be permeating uniquely through the women there in their culture. And you see, he closes this letter in chapter 6, verse 20, saying, turn away from godless chatter and the opposing ideas of what is falsely called knowledge, gnosis, or it's where we actually get this is the beginnings of what we get that we know as the heresy of Gnosticism.
Yeah.
And so what Paul is getting here is that there's this Gnostic belief system that's beginning to form, and it really catches hold in the next century, but it's beginning to form here, and it is uniquely permeating through the women in Ephesus specifically. Just to highlight a few things. First of all, what we know historically from Ephesus, if we were to look at this idea of interpretive method based on the cultural context, there is a temple to the goddess known as Diana or Artemis. And in this cult to Artemis, there's a few things. It's very female-centric. Very female-centric. Then the women would adorn themselves. It talks about not adorning themselves. It talks about modesty. The women would adorn themselves with these beautiful ways of dressing in order to attract other people, specifically women, into this cult. And so that's another interpretive thing. When it talks about modesty, it's not talking about getting men's attention. It's women getting women's attention to lure them into this cult. So here you have women teaching women these cultish beliefs. Now, one of those beliefs is that you know how we call the tree that God put in the garden and told them not to eat from, it's called the knowledge of the good and evil. Well, that's what we're fighting against here, is this cult, this heresy called the knowledge. And they believe that when Eve ate of the tree, that instead of her being cursed and condemned for seizing autonomy, that she actually came into what is known as the knowledge, and that she was liberated and lifted. And so what Paul most likely is doing here when he talks about Adam and Eve is he's not saying, hey, women are subject to men. He's saying, no, when she ate of the tree, it didn't liberate her. It actually brought on the need now for salvation, which will only come through Jesus. Let me just point out one other thing in verse 11. A woman should learn in quietness and full submission. We have to actually understand this is a liberating piece, because in that time, women did not learn. And so Paul's actually giving them the green light to learn. The other piece in verse 12 that we can look at is, I do not permit a woman to teach. Now, in the original language here, there's some play that the translators had to land on, but there's a couple possibilities. The I do not permit a woman to teach might actually be specifically towards one woman, as opposed to generally the women that he's speaking to. So it could specifically be he's writing to say, no, that one woman, I do not want her teaching. And then the way in which it utilizes the word teaching, it's not actually a lack of permission forever. It's actually for a specific period of time so that they or she can learn. Yeah. And so we have to be careful not to copy and paste this into our time and say, like, no, this is for all of us now. And it is a lengthy existence, a forever existence that women can't teach. Most likely, Paul is either talking about one woman or the women that this is permeating through, and saying, hey, just for a period of time, let them learn the truth about the gospel. So I just wanted to highlight some of those things to say, hey, if we were just to say the Bible clearly says and read it in English, we might miss some of the context of what's happening generally in the wider letter. Now, if I could toss out one other thought that you said, is when people say the Bible clearly says and don't walk through the context with me, and I'm okay wrestling and battling through some of those contextual things, because honestly, is it to one woman? Is it to the women? Is it like there's some stuff that actually is not clear. The Bible does not clearly say it. It's not clear. So we could wrestle with that. But normally then where I turn it is to Romans 16, where Phoebe brings the letter. And so it's Phoebe that is the teaching pastor to the church of Rome in that moment. But if you look down a few verses, Paul is writing and he calls a woman by the name of Junia, an apostle among apostles. It's like, well, then what do we do with that?